You are listening to The Shadow of Islam, a new perspective. Join us as we discover the Islamic dilemma, the deceptions and false teachings of Islam, so that you can be more equipped to present the gospel of Jesus Christ to this faith group. Good day and welcome to an episode of The Shadow of Islam, a true perspective. Today I'm going to have a look at a YouTube clip posted on the 1st of May by Adnan Rashid, who tries to deceive his audience that the Quran does not support the inspiration, preservation and authority of the biblical record. This is what he had to say as his main objective.
I'm Adnan Rashid, your brother, back with another video on the topic of the Quran. Does the Quran endorse the Bible is the question I'm going to address today.
I want to take note of a few important beliefs which Islam stand by, which are important to understand in my objections against what Adnan has to say. So the first is that Islam claims that the Quran is perfectly preserved revelation without any error, without any contradiction. And in fact, people like Zakir Naik and Rashid himself say that it has not been changed, not even a dot, for the past 1400 years. Secondly, I want you to have a look at what I'm going to call the Islamic diversion tactic linked to deception. Now remember, diversionary activity is one intended to attract a person's attention away from something you do not want them to think about, because you know what the truth is behind it. So notice how through this discussion, and when you listen to him, notice how he uses that diversion tactic to deceive his people about the truth of what Islam is actually about. So there's a number of half-truths and bits and pieces which just don't seem plausible to me. And I want to recall John 8:43-45. Why do you not understand my speech? Because you are not able to listen to my words. You are of your father the devil, and the desires of your father you want to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and does not stand in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaks a lie, he speaks from his own resources, for he is a liar, and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, you do not believe me. Now that's Jesus speaking, and I want you to take that passage and apply it to the context of what Rashid is trying to promote here under his false pretenses and deceptions. You know, Muslims claim to love Jesus more than Christians do, and thus they should take stock of these wise words which Jesus has here. Anyway, Adnan throughout these clips tries to force the Islamic doctrine into the Christian faith. And I find this an absurd argument. And just because Muhammad said so, how can it be true? Especially on the fact that when no Christian or Jew even accepted Muhammad when he was alive, we all rejected him. In fact, if you read the Quran properly, there's 14 references in the Quran of the time of Muhammad where the people say to Muhammad, you are preaching nothing more than fables and myths which we already know.
But the Quran is very categorical on that question, that the Bible is corrupt. The current Bible in the hands of the Christians and the Jewish people is not pure.
Think about how silly the statement is, that the Bible is corrupt. Take a moment. For example, we know Mark wrote the book of Mark, who was the scribe of Peter, who in turn was instructed by Jesus Christ to look after his church. And in addition, take note of Luke's writing to a friend and Paul writing privately to people he knew. Nowhere were these people's intentions ever to write a holy or divine narrative, especially claiming that it was directly from God. The intention is one of instructions based as an eyewitness and then as apostle of Jesus Christ, of the historical event of Jesus' death and resurrection, not a divine revelation. So it's based on a historical event, and that's the important thing, which is a big difference between Christianity and what Adnan is trying to push here. We don't believe in a book, we believe in an actual event which happened, proving Jesus is God. John 21:15-17 says, when they finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And Jesus said, feed my lambs. He then said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, tend to my sheep. He said to him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. And Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. Jesus' meaning here is, if Peter truly loves his master, he is to shepherd and to care for those who belong to Christ. And how better do you do this than record his events or in his teachings in writing? Can you imagine the Islamic outcry if we just simply relied on the oral tradition of memory?
The Christian missionaries argue that the gospel of Jesus basically is the four gospels.
Here we see how Adnan creates an argument of diversion. You would think Rashid would understand the basic meaning of a gospel to mean the good news. Are there four versions of the good news, or four authors reporting on the good news? And does Paul and James, who also report on the good news, the good news is not separate books. The good news is about the death and resurrection
clear that the Bible is corrupt.
Jesus Christ.
All scholars of textual studies, those who have studied the text of the New Testament as well as the Old Testament, have confirmed that the Bible is corrupt beyond repair. We do not know what the original authors once upon a time wrote. We have no idea as to what Matthew, Mark, Luke and John might have written originally, let alone what God might have inspired if he ever inspired them.
Remember, a diversionary activity is one intended to attract the person's attention away from something which you do not want them to think about or know about or deal with. And that's the problem. Adnan knows when his Muslim friends look at the evidence, they no longer become Muslims. And have a look secondly what he does. He fails to address one major dilemma of Islam: where, when, and who corrupted the Bible. As we will see, according to the Quran, Muhammad had a Bible in his hands. So was that also a corrupted one? And if so, we need evidence to show that. What is Adnan's actual base of proofs? Let's have a look at the scholars. Bart Ehrman is an American New Testament scholar focusing on textual criticism of the New Testament, the historical Jesus, the origins and development of early Christianity. Dr. Ehrman is a self-proclaimed agnostic and atheist. In addition, he has written and edited 30 books, including 3 college textbooks. He has also authorized 6 New York New York Times bestsellers, including the New York Times best-selling Misquoting Jesus and God's Problem. Dr. Ertman is a James A. Gray Distinguished Professor of Religious Studies at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and is a leading authority on the Bible and the life of Jesus. So let's see what this agnostic, atheist scholar has to say about Jesus Christ. The essential Christian beliefs are not affected by textual variants in the manuscript tradition of the New Testament. Misquoting Jesus, page 255. He is also quoted of saying, Jesus existed, and those vocal persons who deny it do so not because they have considered the evidence with the dispassionate eye of the historians, but because they have some other agenda that denies that this denial serves. Interesting. Right on the point which I'm trying to make. Then Adnan Rashid makes 4 points which he has a look at. The Quran confirms the previous scriptures. Secondly, the Quran confirms the corruption of the previous scriptures. Third, the Quran confirms there is a remnant of the original. And 4, the Quran is the criterion and the guardian. So let's have a look at some of those. If you go to verse
46, it clearly states that the gospel, one message was given to Jesus Christ. So therefore, the people of the gospel, you must judge by what God has revealed therein.
No Christian evangelist I know denies this point. The Quran is clear of the inspiration, preservation, and authority of the Bible. What Rashid is claiming here to make his point is there is only one gospel and not 4. But he fails to understand the meaning of the word gospel, as we've already discussed, which means the good news. So he's deceiving you to thinking that there are 4 different messages, instead of 4 people reporting on one single message, which is the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ as co-equal partner with Yahweh as God. What Rashid goes further to say is that there is only one gospel, and that is the Injil, which is mentioned in the Quran. Notice the contradiction and deception here. No Christian believes that Jesus was given this book, and there is not a single thread of evidence to suggest other than that in the Quran. Yet Christians have the writings of the apostles, and what is ignored by Rashid is, where is the supposedly divine book given to Jesus?
The second point is the Quran clearly confirms the corruption of the scriptures of the Jews and Christians. Okay, and that can be seen in chapter 2, verse 79.
Yes, we do not have the originals. But guess what? Neither do Muslims have the original of the Quran. In fact, the manuscript evidence has been altered to match the 1924 Quran. And not only that, Uthman burnt the original documents of the Quran. So notice this tactic of diversion again. Whoopsie, we don't have the evidence, so we need to run away and hide from it. And keep in mind that there are only about 6 to 10 manuscripts of the Quran, and they only date 100 to 200 years after Muhammad's time. How many manuscript evidence do Christians have? In excess of 25,000. Firstly, let's look at the text, and we remind you that Rashid's claim is that the gospel is corrupted, yet there is no mention of this word in this passage whatsoever. The text quoted here by Rashid makes very clear that there's a book which was written by their own hands, and they scribed and they earned money from it. And this is in fact Rashid's very point, that they made money from this. But what is Rashid's reference to this book which the apostles made money from, which was written by their own hand, and which is seen as authentic by Rashid? And that's the Gospel of Thomas. Because you see, Rashid's next point goes on to say that he confirms there's a remnant of the original.
Point
Let's listen
C,
to that.
the third point in this regard is that the Quran also confirms that even though the scriptures of the Jews and Christians have been corrupted, there are remnants within literature around the world. There are remnants of the original revelations that were given to the prophets around the world.
So here we have Adnan's claim. You find the New and the Old Testament we'll only find remnants of the truth of the original there, but he offers no evidence. Funny thing is, what we have today is what Muhammad held in his hands. We see that in Surah 548. He physically had a copy of the Bible in his hands. So what Rashid needs to do is show us between that copy, which is considered authentic, where's it been changed? And trust me, in my time, there is no Muslim in the world who's been able to offer a thread of evidence for that. But then Rashid goes on to mention this Gospel of Thomas as authentic and sane by Jesus. But remember, this is written 250 years after Jesus, and there's only one copy of it. However, what I said earlier on, that it denies the Islamic faith in itself. So I'm not too sure how it can be authentic, because we see what is written in it. His disciples questioned him, and they said to him, "Do you want us to fast? And how should we pray and give alms? And what diet should we observe?" And Jesus said, "Do not lie, and do not do what you hate." So according to Jesus in the Gospel of Thomas, there's no need to pray, no need to fast, no need for any Islamic ritual, no need for any ablution. You can go and drink alcohol, and everything gets thrown out the window if you don't like it. It's your choice. Do what you want. Remember, it is because of these very false beliefs in records such as the Gospel of Thomas that were being taught that the early church had councils like Council of Nicaea and Constantinople to come against these false beliefs and excommunicate these kind of documents out of the church. But I want you to note that although we have the written testimony in the Bible and the early church records of who authored the four Gospels, Adnan claims that the authors are anonymous, while standing on the fact that the single manuscript with no author or no historical backing is considered authentic in Islamic traditions. If we were to use the same methodology in reverse onto Adnan, do you think he would be happy if we said there's no author of the Quran, because we know that the records were burnt and written by Uthman? But then there again, we can't accept the hadith because there's no author of the hadith. This is just hearsay by Bukhari, also written 200 years afterwards, 250 years after Muhammad's death. So therefore is also fabrication, because it is only hearsay, and he rejected 98% of the hadiths he collected. So therefore there's no author of the Quran as well. This is just a make-believe. I doubt that he'd accept that as the Islamic truth. Rashid then goes on to say that the Quran is the criteria and the guardian. And I'm dumbstruck by such silly statements. Let's forget that there is no original Quran. There is no manuscript evidence for it. Or the manuscript evidence comes late. There's very little manuscript evidence for it. And then you have Uthman burning all the records, and then you find any textual criticism of the manuscript evidence shows that it's been altered and changed to meet the 1924 Hafs Quran. But let's have a look. Let's just assume all of that is wrong and that the Quran, what's written in the Quran, is authentic and directly from the true God of creation, which knows everything. And the true God of creation claims that the sun sets in a muddy pool of water. He then goes on to say Adam was the first Muslim. And then, no, sorry, it was Moses. Oopsie. No, it must have been Abraham. Oh no, Jesus. No, it was Muhammad. So the true God of creation actually does not know when his faith or his final criteria as Muslim, as the faith or the religion of Islam, where Muslims follow this faith, was actually created. He's not too sure if it was Adam, Moses, Abraham, Jesus, or Muhammad, but they're all stated to be the first Muslim in the Quran. Yet none of them are quoted of ever saying the Islamic statement of faith, which is a criteria of Islam to become a Muslim. So please ask yourself a question. How does Adam, Moses, Abraham, or Jesus claim that Muhammad is the last and final prophet and Allah is the only Allah to be worshipped when it was created way after their death and they knew nothing about it? Then why does also Surah 1094 say that if you're in doubt, go and read the scriptures of truth which came before you? It just doesn't make sense. If this is the clear guidance and the supervisor, as Adnan claims, the supervisor is telling you, if you're not sure, go to the false records because they got the truth in it. It's silly. And then we need to ask ourselves, this true God of creation called Allah in the Quran doesn't know whether the world was created in 6 or 8 days. And then, which is the worst dagger in the back, so to say, is that the Quran says that the Christians will be superior until the end of the world. That's in Surah 355. And that's only just to name a few. So take note on how Adnan Rashid creates his own problems to answer his own limited view based on his faith, while ignoring the actual truth and deceptions within the Quran itself. But the question which Rashid never answers is why there is no eyewitnesses to the Quran, and secondly, why a book suddenly supersedes a book with no eyewitnesses, suddenly supersedes an actual historical event such as the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ as the true God of creation. And please note, this is only some of the evidence which I've come up in a short time against these false claims which Adnan Rashid has made in this video clip. Thank you for listening, and comments are welcome. And if you'd like us to support our goal in offering a true perspective of Islam, please go to www.patreon.com/diggingdeeper SA.